outlet. So joining us now, though, our good friend, the co-host of Sports Talk Mississippi, here on the network, Brian Hadad, live from SEC Media Days over there. Morning, Brian.
Good morning to you, Gerard. How are you this morning there in Jackson?
Doing fantastic. All right, so the coach up there, Lane Kiffin, he had his little remarks yesterday, and I'm looking at an article here. I scanned several articles overnight. CBS Sports. They're saying in their headline, Lane Kiffin has already turned Ole Miss into one of the nation's most dangerous teams. We hope so, but what do you think about that?
Well, first off, let's clarify we, Gerard. I don't know if I hope so, but you can hope so on that. Yeah, I mean, there's no question about that. Offensively, Ole Miss is as good as anybody in the country. They're going to move the football. They're going to score points. And if they're any good defensively, they don't have to be great. They don't even have to be pretty good. Just average. Can they just 28 points per game, 27 points per game? That's going to be a really good football team. There's no question about it, because when you're good at quarterback, it just makes everything else easier. Ole Miss is as good at quarterback as anybody in the SEC.
Yeah, and you're so right about that. Of course, the pain of being a fan is like, oh, my gosh, we got to give the ball back to them. And sometimes I kind of wish we didn't score so fast, because that just means the other team was going to get it and often would score on a sustained drive, keeping our offense from getting the football. I think it's part of the strategy, obviously. Keep that offense off the field, because every time they get on there, a couple of plays and they're in the end zone. I mean, that really was happening. Yeah. So, well, what's he saying about the defense? Is the prospect of that this year? Is it going to be improved?
They expect improvement, and we got to talk with Jalen Jones yesterday, and he says that group is working hard to be improved. They've got some veteran guys there now. They've got some guys who've played in the SEC, and they have that experience. They added a couple of key pieces in the recruiting process. So I think all in all, look, I mean, and I'm not being flippant when I say it would be tough for them to be worse than they were a season ago. They're going to be improved. It's just the scale of that improvement will determine if Ole Miss is a 6-7 win team or could possibly be an 8-9 win team.
Yeah. Do you not remember the time period, Brian? It wasn't too long ago when it seems like, at least in the state of Mississippi, the recruiting wars were often over the defensive tackle, the defensive end, a safety, a linebacker. It just seemed to be lots of focus on defense and defensive talent, sometimes converting top-flight offensive talent into defensive players. I mean, the plan, it seems like, at least in Ole Miss's case, that they're so highly focused on offense, recruiting offensive talent. Is that something you see as a trend in college football, or is that sort of unique to these high-powered offensive programs?
Well, I mean, if you go back to the Freeze days, I mean, he recruited offense to the detriment sometimes of getting defensive players.
Right.
And now with Kiffin, I think he's done a better job of balancing that out. Whereas on the other hand, Mississippi State, and I talked about this earlier today with one of the interviews I did, Mullen always put his top guys defensively. If he recruited an athlete, they were playing defense. And so that's, and Ole Miss has missed out on some guys. I mean, think about the recruiting misses, like of a Nakobe Dean, Radar Jones, who ended up at LSU, a Nathan Pickering, who ended up at Mississippi State. These are guys that would be starting for Ole Miss.
Yep.
So they've missed on those guys. They've got to do a better job of getting those guys, and we'll see if they do.
It almost suggests, does it not, that the programs that are able to sort of balance that talent, effectively recruit talent on both sides of the ball. I guess Alabama, of course, comes to mind. Georgia comes to mind in that regard. Certainly LSU a couple of years ago, as good as any team ever to suit up in college football. They just tend to succeed, and Ole Miss just has to hope they can outscore them.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why elite teams are elite teams. They have elite talent on both sides of the ball. Where Mississippi State and Ole Miss are happy to get one 5-star guy, they're going to get 8, 9, 10 5-star guys, and they're going to load up on both sides of the ball. So, yeah, it's all about, you got to be right in your evaluations. When you coach at Ole Miss, when you coach at State, You're taking some low 4-star, high 3-star kind of guys. You got to hit on those evaluations, and then you got to be able to develop them into NFL kind of players.
Yeah. So, all right, so what are you expecting today? We got Coach Mike Leach, right?
I'm expecting a lot of dumb questions. I'll just put it that way. I'm expecting a lot of questions about aliens, about, dinosaurs, movie references. That's what I expect. Not a whole ton of football probably thrown at Mike Leach if I had to guess. We'll get more from the players, which we will have here on SportsTalk Mississippi. And I'll be talking to Mike Leach as well. I promise I'll ask at least one football question.
You may not get a straight answer on that one, but you would on the alien and the
on the other ones, yeah. Yeah,
the
you're right.
pirate questions. It reminds me, Brian, of the great Les Miles, who every time you asked him a question, he answered like, what did he say right there? Used to be a great website, the Quotable Les Miles, and you can click on it, and every time you did, one of his real quotes would come up in a balloon out of his mouth.
They could do that for Leach. I can't wait to see some of the questions he gets today. There's going to be a lot of head shaking happening as that going on.
Well, that's what makes it interesting. So it's a good time, is it not? And certainly the SEC and really across the whole state. Look at these characters we have, these sort of bigger-than-life coaches across our state.
It's definitely great for me and for Richard and for Michael Borky because they are all giving us something to talk about in their own way.
Plenty of fodder for sure. Anything that has occurred this week thus far, Brian, has kind of caught your attention over at SEC Media Days?
Everybody is so, coach speaky over here. But in all honesty, Ed Orgeron and talking about the things that went wrong last year, I think he was relatively open about that. I thought Kiffin did a great job for Ole Miss yesterday promoting his program. We're scheduled to talk in just a few minutes to the SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey. Yeah. We'll have that interview later today on Sports Talk, and I'm interested to hear what he has to say, regarding vaccinations and things of that nature. So, yeah, there's been some interesting stuff, but for the most part, we're excited to be here.
That's right. We're going to suit up. My favorite, digressing a little bit, my favorite all-time say nothing but a bunch of coach speak cliches. I don't know if you remember him. You're too young. Jerry Stovall. And,
at LSU.
Yeah, at LSU. And I don't remember the radio station down there. Of course, there's a lot fewer on the dial in those days, and there was a dominant station. But there was one of the anchors that every week would just do a great sort of skit on Jerry Stovall. But every time they'd ask him, how do you think we're going to do this weekend, Coach? Well, I think if we don't miss any tackles, our special teams don't really give up any big plays, and our quarterback completes 70% of our passes, and all our running backs get 200 yards, I think we have a really good chance to be in the game. Like, okay.
Mullen always liked to say, every week, 50% of the teams are going to win and 50% of the teams are going to lose. Thank you, Coach. Math was always not a strong suit for me. I appreciate that.
Well, to some extent, you got to give them a bit of a pass because people parse every word, as you know. That's what you guys do for a living to the nth degree.
That's what keeps food on the table in the Hadad household.
And so they know, well, I better be – they're kind of half coaches and half politicians to some extent. And then, let's face it, they're often serve as dads to their team. They
wear more than one hat. They're wearing a bunch of hats, no question about that. They're salesmen, they're fathers, they're coaches, they're politicians. They're a little bit of everything.
I remember back in the days when we had Coach Nutt and I attended an event. We got just a minute or so here, and I happened to be present, and it was the last day of practice before they went home for Christmas break, and he said, I don't know anything good that can happen to a college-age kid after midnight. His message being, get your butt at home at midnight.
Stay home.
Yeah. Brian, always good catching up with you. You guys are doing a great job over there. Looking forward to the show later on today. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Gerard.
The JT Show will continue after these messages. We'll be right back.